Overrated characters are one of the most contentious debate topics in the community because no one can agree on what it even means for a character to be overrated because the question is inherently biased. So, I will be the spokesman for the entire community and compile the definitive list of the most overrated characters in the One Piece community. I will be playing devil's advocate this video and removing all of my inherent bias going forward, so if you hear me make an argument in this video, don't crucify me because it's not what I myself believe, as I am arguing for absolutely every side. The criteria I'll be using for what an overrated character is the rating the community gives a character on average versus the amount the character is actually shown. Just getting it out of the way now, Dragon is not going to be on this list because he's an entirely narrative character. He can be overrated or underrated because there's nothing to rate, period. Another thing I'd like to add is that a character can be both overrated and underrated at the same time. This means that the community either lowballs a character extremely on one hand for what they've shown, or they highball the character extremely on the other hand. It just means that no one is giving an accurate rating of the character. The reason I'm going this deep on the criteria is because I know most of the comments are going to tell me I was biased in making the video, which, if you stay around and watch till the end, I'll prove my lack of bias in the end of the video, and you'll know that these are not going to be based off my own personal views. Now, with all the preamble out of the way, it's time to get into the most overrated characters in One Piece. First on the list is Clifford, the big red dog, also known as Sakazuki. Don't leave yet, Admiral fans, because you'll get your compensation later. Akainu's rating in the community is highly contentious and is a clear example of the no one rates him accurate point I just made. It's either people highball Akainu into the level of Roger, Garp, and Primebeard, or lowball him into the bracket of people who can't beat Kaido or Big Mom. Akainu has both good showings and awful showings, and most of those awful showings are from Marineford. We can say all the livelong day that he was holding back in Marineford, but if we're being honest with ourselves, the fact that Akainu didn't just flood the battlefield with lava and turn Marineford into a hellscape like he did on Punk Hazard does not stop the fact that he was still off-guarded by an old and dying Whitebeard. It also doesn't help that this same old dying Whitebeard was not able to use ACOG and is stated to have been deteriorating the entire fight. Don't get me wrong, however, this old Whitebeard is still a monster of a fighter. It's not like Akainu was getting slammed into the ground by King or Ben Beckman. But if you look at me with a straight face and say that you think Prime Garp, Roger, or Primebeard himself are getting caught like that, then you might need to start signing up for those law classes because you could literally defend anybody once you finish. Now, the argument that those who like to highball Akainu may end up using is the Punk Hazard Haki Bloom one. It's logical, it makes sense, but it is by and large unquantifiable. By this logic, one fight took Akainu from getting off-guarded by sick dying Oldbeard in the middle of a war to logistically being able to bang it out with Primebeard and Roger at the peak of their strength. Mind you, by this logic, the upscale would apply to Aokiji as well. And Aokiji, regardless of how much you think he was holding back, was still struggling in a fight with Old Garp. Again, just like with Marineford, Old Garp is not some commander, he's not Kid-in-Law, but by Garp's own admission, he cannot hold a candle to himself in his prime, and Aokiji was using Haki and new named attacks on Garp in that fight even if he was holding back. It also doesn't help Aokiji's case either that Garp got stabbed by Shiryu in a sneaky way that Garp was able to react to and perceive. And then they both basically hit a double knockdown on each other after that. If that was Aokiji's performance against an old Garp and he would have been relative to Akainu pre-time skip and gotten the same Haki Bloom post-time skip, if not more, because he lost that fight and got damaged more, so thusly would have further to bloom, then I don't see why exactly it is that Akainu is now on the same level of that of Primebeard, Roger, and Garp. The notion that Akainu has to be that strong because he's the Fleet Admiral doesn't make sense logically, or even narratively, because Sengoku was Fleet Admiral and wasn't stronger than Garp, and Akainu being Fleet Admiral in the current Navy doesn't necessitate him being the peak of the Navy for now and all time, because he has no direct correlation to Garp as far as anything goes besides them both being in the Navy. This is like saying that Nami has to surpass Roger because she's new gen and wore the straw hat that one time. The new gen surpassing the old gen only works when the new gen are directly inheriting the will of the old gen. Kobe surpassing Prime Garp is feasible because he's supposed to be the new hero. Akainu surpassing Garp doesn't really track that same way. He's obviously not some bum that can't beat Kaido and Big Mom, but saying that he's dead even or even stronger than Primebeard, Garp, and Roger based off what we've seen him do previously and what we've seen his essentially equal do currently is extremely overrating him. Speaking of Kaido, he's also on the list. People say in a one-on-one fight, always bet on Kaido. Land, sea, and air, out of every living thing in the world, this pirate is said to be the strongest creature alive. People would also say that Don Krieg is one of the most terrifying pirates to sail the seven seas, and that Enel is a literal god because he's unbeatable, but sure, this rumor definitely means that Kaido is top 1 now and forever. Let me be biased for a second and tell y'all my thoughts, then I'll go back to being real quick. Kaido is by far the most most overrated character I've seen, and not for the reason you think, which is him losing to Gear 5. It's the fact that he was stated to have been getting stronger Haki from fighting Luffy before Luffy even went Gear 5. Kaido was getting Haki blooms off of going toe-to-toe with a Luffy who just pulled ACOG out of his butt. A stronger Gear 4 Snake Man that got blitzed and one-shot by Kizaru was putting work on Kaido and making him Haki bloom using Devil Fruit amps off the Henny before he even went Gear 5. Gear 5 being on its deathbed was going blow for blow and banging it out with Kaido. Lucci unironically fought a stronger Gear 5 than the one Kaido fought. I got a video in the works planned for a breakdown of how exactly a rematch between Luffy and Kaido would go, as well as a breakdown of a rematch between Luffy and every antagonist in the series right after the arc ends to see if Luffy was stronger or just got lucky, so stick around for that in the future. But back to being an unbiased advocate. Kaido being the quote-unquote world's strongest creature and people using this to glaze him the top one forever and always, and on the level of people like Roger and Whitebeard, never made any sense to me, because Kaido places these people on a separate tier to the woman who was going blow for blow with him, and by his own admission is someone he'd need to go all out to kill, because that's what this panel means and is saying. This just shows that Kaido was never really like that. Kizaru was basically clowning Kaido by saying that Snake Man Luffy definitely shows him that he was terrifying enough to take out Kaido, and then just no-sell Snake Man Luffy in the most casual way right after that. Kizaru genuinely could have beaten both Kaido and Big Mom before they even got ramped up into the fight for real, because these two have almost no battle IQ when it comes to facing people that they don't know are strong off rip. Kaido would genuinely start in base form and get his skull caved in by a lightspeed kick from offshore Wano. Kaido should not be in anyone's top 10 current characters if you believe he's alive, and it's sick to even place him in the top 20 characters of all time. Another extremely overrated character I see is Crocodile. I'm not lying to you, I didn't even know people rated Crocodile this highly until I heard people in my Discord saying he might be hanging with Mihawk off his portrayal in Marineford. Not even just my Discord, but y'all on YouTube too. I had to hit a quadruple tick when I heard that. Crocodile got bodied by Jozu. He got his head cut off by Doflamingo, and that attack would have killed him if Doflamingo wasn't playing around with him, by the way. He gets held off by Luffy in Marineford and clashes with Mihawk when Mihawk wasn't even looking in his direction. He did flea bite damage to Akainu, and people are genuinely glazing him to be on par with guys like King and Lucci. Crocodile is a mafia boss. Oda regretting putting him into the story this early doesn't change the fact that his feats are what his feats are. Doflamingo is bodying Crocodile. Mihawk is bodying Crocodile. King, Queen, Katakuri, Sanji, Jinbei, all of them are bodying Crocodile. You can start glazing Crocodile when he has more feats, but a 1.9 billion bounty is not doing anything at all for him, because by that logic, place Kin and Law over Loki because their bounty is higher than his, and place Queen over Sanji and King over Zoro because their bounties are still higher. Crocodile Glaze is essentially trying to time the market and overbuy in the hopes that you'll shoot to the moon. Who do you guys think that Crocodile is legitimately going to fight in the future of the story? Like, seriously. Sanji? Like, it's really only Sanji for running the Cross Guild versus Straw Hats gimmick, and at that point, Crocodile versus Sanji isn't even going to be a serious fight, and he might genuinely get done like Lucci to show how far the gap is between Luffy and his old foes again. I know you guys don't want to hear this one, but Ryuuma is on the list, and let me tell you why. Remember what I said about this list being where people put the characters versus what they've actually shown. This is going to be the greatest example of that. Ryuuma being called a sword god is not a feat. People on Shandora were calling a literal snake that Nolan split in half a god. Kalgara was stronger than the god he was sacrificing his loved ones to. A god title means nothing when it's fodder giving you that title. But Ryuuma creating a black blade, yeah, you know, impressive, very impressive. Only one of the two people to ever do it, and the second is the strongest swordsman alive currently. I mean, that must mean that Shisui is a pretty highly ranked blade, right? After all, it belonged to the mythical sword god of Wano, who I'm told is the sole and only reason that no one wanted to go invade Wano for 400 years. Surely a blade wielded by Ryuuma with all of the accolades should be right next to Yoru as the strongest blade in the world, right? Wrong, it's in the 21 great grades. You have a black blade in the same class as the Nidai Kitetsu. There are 20 other blades considered on the same level as the mythical black blade of the sword god of Wano. And this is Shisui as a black blade, by the way. If Shisui wasn't a black blade, it would be in the grade below the great grade, because turning your sword into a black blade is meant to raise its rank. Ryuuma is unironically a plumber era swordsman that people think can kick it with the LeBrons and Currys of One Piece. His greatest and only feat is cutting down a dragon over the skies of Wano. Odin cut the mountain god in half so cleanly that they could stitch it back together when it was cut all the way through. The mountain god is far bigger than the dragon that Ryuma's legend was made for based off what we've seen. Now Ryuuma being on Odin's level is no diss to Ryuuma, but people genuinely rate Ryuuma on the level of Joy Boy, Davy Jones, and Emu over the likes of Mihawk, Shanks, and Roger simply because he looks just like Zoro. I don't know who told you guys this, but everyone in Zoro's bloodline does not need to be top tier for Zoro to be top tier. Ryuuma can be the sword god of Wano that defended it for decades and not be in the top 30 of characters of all time. End of Wano, Zoro could do the same things that Ryuuma is said to be able to do minus creating a black blade, and until we know what that entails, that is not a feat to upscale Ryuuma to Mihawk's level, because Ryuma's black black blade is literally on the same tier as Zoro's non-black blades that were harder for him to use and more powerful for him to finally master because Enma was an upgrade over Shisui the black blade. Until Ryuma gets some genuine top tier feats, his statements and aura do not carry him as far as people want to take him. Another old era jobber I want to talk about is Imu. Imu is in the dragon camp of living off his narrative and portrayal. This man is a glorified sugar, but he literally has the same kit as Wapol. I wouldn't be surprised if Imu's buggy's dad because being a fraud could end up actually being genetic. Imu is a straight up hacks merchant. His attacks might as well be covered in pillows because for the way the community glazes him to gapping the entire verse, he sure doesn't kill a lot of low tier characters. Kaido would be able to one-hit Sabo, Akainu would be able to one-hit Sabo, but Imu, he can't even one-shot Cobra out of his wheelchair. Cobra is up after being hit by Imu twice. Imu in Gunko's body, which didn't nerf his ACOG range as far as we see because it's of similar range to what he was showing when he pulled up to God Valley personally, couldn't even take out Brook with Conqueror's coding. It's either we need to place that shield in the top 10 of strongest materials in One Piece, or Imu is not nice like that as a fighter and is simply a hacks merchant. Now Raftel, even if he is a hacks merchant, that's part of his kit. Are we slandering people for having a hacks bag now? No, I'm not slandering him for that, but it's just that the people glazing Imu seem to think he'd be crazy without his bag. We slander the Holy Knights for being regen merchants, but the same doesn't apply to the CEO of the regen merchants apparently. I keep hearing that Imu tanked the 6v1 attack on God Valley, that he literally just big body ate that hit and kept it pushing. But he literally got done like Boo did from Vegeta's final explosion. That attack vaporized him completely and then he regenerated from it, which, cold, you regenerated from it, W hacks, but people genuinely think that Imu was taking that hit with no regen. Imu is more than likely getting vaporized with half of those characters swinging at him. You give him no regen and rocks with casual sword swings is shredding him into pieces the same way he did for Garling when he was still regenerating. People want to glaze Imu like he's actually a strong guy when he's just a wizard demon. He's a weak man with strong hacks. No one is glazing Foxy, I don't see anyone glazing Sugar, so I don't know why we're overrating and glazing Imu and saying he's a valid combatant. On to the son of Dracula, the Hawkeye himself, we have Mihawk. Shanks fans, I know you've been waiting for this one. Raftel King mask back on for a second. I would never in my life place Mihawk on this list if I wasn't playing devil's advocate, but I am. Unbiased mask back on. Marineford is where agendas go to die. Call the scaling and Marineford inconsistent, say Oda had no idea what he was doing all you want, but that is still an arc in the story and those are still feats that can be used in discussion. If I just said, don't use those feats, they're from Wano because I felt Oda wasn't scaling properly in that arc, you'd laugh in my face and tell me I'm coping. Mihawk saying his blade knows no restraint and apologizing to Shanks while actively trying to kill Luffy is not a good look for him. And there genuinely isn't even an argument for Mihawk just trying to aura farm, but secretly being holding back because he was actively going after Luffy's life. Like he was genuinely going to cut straight through Luffy's hands if he did not pull back. I would have kept going after him until he died if Vista did not stop him. Oh, by the way, Vista stopped him. The man who couldn't get past Akainu while having Marco with him was capable of holding off the same Mihawk who made it his goal to go take out Luffy. The Vista statements do not help the case for Mihawk at all either because some of them are genuinely placing Mihawk relative to Vista. Like I said with Ryuma, the Black Blade argument doesn't work at all, and just like with Ryuma, the fact that Yoru is in the same grade as blades that aren't black blades probably suggests to you that Yoru would be in the great grade and not the supreme grade blade if it wasn't a black blade. Now it could just be the case that Yoru is so far above the other supreme grade blades that it might as well be in its own category, but there is no other category which it could be in, so I'll take it easy on that point. Mihawk fans better pray Zoro doesn't end up making his own grades category by the end of the series with his 3 swords in it though. Mihawk is overrated in the sense that people fight too hard for his position and try to defend him from things that have already happened. Mihawk is in the same camp as Akainu where he is both overrated and underrated. I kinda didn't want to put him up here, but I kinda have to based off the feats and statements he's been showing. If I'm not giving Kaido the title man tags, then I'm not gonna give it to Mihawk either, because unless the world knows how strong the one-armed Shanks who beat Loki after being weaker than him with 2 arms prior is, then his title doesn't really mean anything in this discussion because Mihawk doesn't ever fight one-armed Shanks when we know for a fact that one-armed Shanks got significantly more powerful than 2-armed Shanks did. Unless Shanks also gets put on the list if he didn't actually run the ones with Loki. Oldbeard is a surefire pick for this list, but it's not as obvious as you may think. Oldbeard's performance in Marineford was stellar when you take into account the fact that he was actively deteriorating as he fought, but the issue with his rating in the community is that people end up rating him way higher than he should be, even knowing this fact. There are genuinely people out there who think a sick Oldbeard is beating any Admiral in a 1v1, and if you told people that characters like Zoro and Yamato have a chance at taking him out, they'd call you crazy. He was putting the work in on the Admirals and essentially 1 vs all Marineford with consistent waves of fodder. But acting like he stands any chance at all against Akainu, Aokiji, or Kizaru in a fight because he gets sneak shots or lucky hits in every now and then is just ridiculous. Oldbeard can't even be a green bullet for being honest, and Luffy in base post 1010 is probably beating him him in a fight too. Like Whitebeard said, even he can't remain the strongest forever. A healthy Oldbeard though wouldn't make it on this list because of all the statements concerning him, but I could say that he may be overrated for the fact that some people think that Oldbeard is relative to Primebeard without his sickness because there's statement and data book merchants that don't use context and can acknowledge that Whitebeard was steadily declining due to age even regardless of his sickness, but that's such a niche portion of the community to add healthy Oldbeard as well as sick Oldbeard. You may not see it as much nowadays, but back in the day, Magellan was heavily overrated by the community, or at least the section of the community that I saw. There were people genuinely putting him in the same tier as the Admirals and saying that he can one-shot anyone if he lands a hit. Haki completely negated the win condition that Magellan has, which is contact from his poison. If the poison doesn't make contact with you, then it doesn't affect you, which is the entire reason Luffy used candle armor to face Magellan and get some hits off. Anyone who is above gear 2 or base Luffy and Impel down and has armament Haki is beating Magellan up. Magellan is not on par with Blackbeard because he caught him off guard, because when Blackbeard knew what he was facing, he put Magellan on life support. Magellan's abilities are terrifying, yes, they are quite strong when you use them against certain characters, but Magellan has no real counter to armament Haki, creating a barrier between the skin and his poison, unless his poison works regardless of Haki, which in that case, Venom Road low diffs the entire verse, minus people with ACOG or advanced armament Haki blocking. Nami one-shots him with Zeus, Usopp low diffs him with Skull Bomb Grasp because his poison is flammable, and Frankie neg diffs him with a Shogun while Brook simply obliterates him because he can't be poisoned. Robin would have logically been able to beat him if the damage her limbs took didn't transfer to her main body, but Magellan hard counters her despite her logistically being strong enough. Katakuri for some reason is still getting gas from the community despite the fact that he's been cliffed massively after Whole Cake Island. Future Sight is not a win condition because a lot of characters are faster than Whole Cake Island Snake Man. Sanji low diffs him, Zoro low diffs him, Kid and Law low diff him, Yamato low diffs him, Queen is slamming him, and so is King. Jack unironically has an argument for beating Katakuri, and so does Ulti. I know you guys like to think being an arc antagonist or a Luffy fight automatically upscales you to relative to strong characters in the future arcs, but Katakuri got dropped by Luffy in under 30 hits. Anyone with an ancient zone is beating him in a battle of attrition, even if they can't hit him consistently, because Katakuri is so not used to being hit or facing opponents he doesn't just low diff automatically, that simply using Future Sight constantly was causing his Future Sight to wear down due to his observation Haki usage. Whole Cake Island was 4 arcs ago, and Cat's last showing was him getting hack stiffed by Caesar and going blow for blow with Oven. It's time we acknowledge that Whole Cake Island Katakuri is not him, and that he's going to need an upscale to compete in the current story. Yamato gets a lot of slander for things outside of her strength, but as it concerns strength, she gets glazed to high heaven for some reason. Kaido was not going all out on Yamato, even if he was trying to defeat her. Yamato does not scale relative to Kaido, and she does not scale anywhere near it. Yamato is definitely a powerful character and deserves props, but her attack in base with ACOG was essentially a flea bite to Green Bull. Yamato is not beating any Admiral in a fight because Kaido didn't one-shot her. Believe it or not, Kaido isn't capable of one-shotting the Admirals either. Yamato's portrayal at best places her relative to Gear 4 before Luffy splits the sky with Kaido, which, that feat alone after the fact places base Luffy above Yamato in hybrid. Sanji is stronger, Zoro is stronger, Kid and Law are arguably stronger, and King is capable of going toe-to-toe with her in a fight. Some of these characters are only really overrated as a way to downplay and underrate other characters, and Yamato's overration is simply just cope about how strong the Admirals are. Another character that I see that is severely overrated is also Zoro. I like Zoro. I respect Zoro's strength, but the amount of people who think that Zoro can one-shot anyone if he lands a good hit is crazy. Zoro was going toe-to-toe relative with Lucci. The way the fight ends does not negate the entire battle that was going on before. Zoro had no reason to hold back on Lucci the entirety of Egghead. He sensed Saturn and the Gorosei and how ominous their presences were, and his observation should be good enough to sense when Luffy gets knocked out of Gear 5. And despite this, Zoro is going band for band with Lucci for the entire time Luffy was fighting Kizaru up until after the Gorosei already got to Egghead. There are some of you that think Zoro is hanging with Luffy in Gear 5. I don't know what it is that caused you to believe the man who had to pull ACOG out on Lucci, this is ACOG by the way, stop lying to yourself, is on par with the same Gear 5 that bodied Lucci in 3 hits with no ACOG. Zoro is not hanging with the Admirals, he's not beating Big Mom. Elbaf Zoro will have to get some showcase moments for their argument to cash out, but based off what we've seen, he does not have it like y'all think he does. Now Ashura Zoro with ACOG might be a different story, but that's like Luffy using Bowman while in Gear 5, which is simply just a hypothetical boost that has no actual scaling. Unironically, Luffy is significantly overrated by a vast portion of the community. Being the MC does not stop you from being overrated. Some people out here genuinely believe that Gear 5 is top 1 and its only issue is stamina. I have no idea where the notion that Gear 5 is the top of the verse if it had unlimited stamina came from, but that is just not true. Luffy with greater stamina can hang with a larger variety of characters, sure, but giving him unlimited stamina doesn't change the fact that Kizaru can still damage him, and anyone with a higher AP than Kizaru is also damaging Luffy. Luffy is finally on the top tier with the top of the verse, but he has not broken into that top of his age bracket quite yet. If he did have infinite stamina, I see him comfortably beating out every Admiral with him him maybe losing to Akainu and Aokiji and beating out every emperor minus Shanks and Blackbeard. Mihawk is probably still beating him in a fight. Logistically, Dragon is also going to be able to beat him in a fight. Loki, based off what we've seen him do versus what we've seen Luffy do, is also going to beat him in a fight. Luffy looking at a chained up nerfed Loki and saying he can take him when he has no idea what his abilities are is not proof that Luffy is stronger than him. I'm adding Law because of the way that some of you guys genuinely believe he stood any chance at all against Blackbeard. Law performed the exact same way that Ace did, which is get 1 or 2 hits off and still get bodied. Ace stood no chance against Blackbeard even if he landed some hits, and Law stood no chance against Blackbeard even if he landed some good hits. Not Blackbeard only, but Zoro as well. Zoro surpassed Law after Wano. It is an extreme diff more than likely simply due to the way that Law's abilities are, but there is nothing in Law's arsenal that is dropping a full health Zoro in one shot. Zoro is more than capable of getting a hit off on Law at some point in the fight, and Law is not a durability fighter. Zoro has a lot more attacks that can one-shot Law than vice versa. We need to stop acting like Law is still considered a rival to Luffy because that stopped the moment 10-10 dropped and Luffy told Law to get off the rooftop so he can handle Kaido. Law is not him. He's cool, put some respect on his name, sure, but y'all be overrating the heck out of Law for no reason. Last on the list, and like I said, these aren't all my arguments, so don't act like they are, is Blackbeard. Based off what he's shown compared to the glaze a segment of the community gives him, he's most certainly overrated. If off-screen feats were valid, then I'd be placing Prime Chinjao on par with Kaido because he fought Roger and Garp numerous times after God Valley. Blackbeard's on-screen showings do not warrant the kind of glaze he gets currently, as there are people that genuinely think he's hanging with the likes of Roger, Garp, and Shanks, when Shock Willie and Law have him looking like this at the end of a fight. The win streak gimmick is great and all, but an emperor should be capable of beating the people that Blackbeard is fighting with much less difficulty than Blackbeard has fighting them. It's even contentious whether or not he even beats Luffy right now, because Luffy might genuinely pain diff him before Blackbeard can run out his stamina clock. If he gets another ability or a buff anyways, the Glazers can get satisfied, which is more than likely what's going to happen anyways, and that would just mean that current Blackbeard is definitely not the man that y'all think he is. Those are all the characters I got for the list. These are characters that I either believe are overrated myself or see get called overrated based off what the community says about them versus what they've actually done. I agree with quite a few of these personally, and some of them I think aren't really overrated because people slander them for being overrated to the point that the characters are actually underrated because of overcorrection, but that's a discussion for another time. If there's any arguments that you'd like to make, the comments are open and the Discord is jumping, so you can always get a chance to voice your grievances there. Let me know what characters you believe are overrated, what arguments you agree with and disagree with, and which characters shouldn't have been placed in the video. If you guys enjoyed this one, drop a like, subscribe, and stay tuned in for more high quality One Piece content. I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.